Okay, we've had a few more folks show up. I'm going to go ahead and get going. Good morning, everybody. My name's Al Smith. I'm the project lead for DigDeep's Decentralized Wastewater Innovation Cohort, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Decentralized Wastewater Federal Roundtable, co-hosted by the Decentralized Wastewater Innovation Cohort, led by DigDeep, USEPA, and the USDA. We've got a really exciting program for everybody today. We're going to hear from DigDeep's co-founder, George McGraw, the director of the Office of Wastewater Management, Andrew Sawyers at the USEPA, and the Water Programs Director for the Rural Utilities Service at the USDA, Steve Polachek, followed by the Decentralized Wastewater Innovation Cohort. They're going to present policy brief findings on different opportunities that exist within current and future programs. And then we'll have a short Q&A session afterward, and hopefully have a very good discussion on this. I'm going to pass it off to George McGraw, DigDeep's founder and CEO, to kick us off. And looking forward to this, everybody.
Thanks, Al. Good morning, everybody. My name is George McGraw. I'm the founder and CEO at DigDeep.org. And we are so pleased to have you today. In 2019, right before the pandemic, earlier that year, I was in Lowndes County, Alabama, and I met with Sherry, Bradley, and Kevin White, who are members of this cohort on this call today. And we toured people's homes, and as Sherry introduced us to residents, they pointed out their septic woes. A lot of people were straight piping into their front or backyards. They had septic systems installed that didn't work. We heard how they had been taken advantage of by, honestly, con artists posing as septic system installers who promised that all of their problems would go away if they would just invest, $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 in a new septic system that was sort of shoddily installed and never worked. Of course, we all know that in Lowndes County, there's this problem with infiltration in the soil due to the clay soil in the Black Belt. Learned so much on that trip and connected so deeply with these families who really trusted Kevin and Sherry. And it was really wonderful to be brought into relationship with them. And hearing all about those frustrations, I think one of the main things we heard from residents was how alone they felt. And this cohort, the DWIC, this community, is really an antidote to that. Decentralized systems make up 20 to 25% of all wastewater systems nationwide, but they regularly lack the visibility, the funding, the consistent regulation, or the creative innovation we need to solve this problem, especially in rural and disadvantaged communities. Perhaps most importantly, though, they lack a connection to one another, which can make this really hard work feel especially isolating. So DigDeep started the Decentralized Wastewater Innovation Cohort, or the DWIC, in late 2020 as a response to this need to connect these communities implementing innovative decentralized wastewater solutions, really in isolation. And this DWI cohort represents communities across the entire United States, from Hawaii to Alaska to Long Island. We're really proud of the geographic diversity of this group of people, which I think made the site visits really fun. And each of these are really actively implementing innovative decentralized wastewater solutions that meet their unique challenges in the context that they come from. The partners represented here, I'm so pleased to see you all, have really deep experience in these issues, and they're an integral part of the communities they serve, which I think is really crucial to success in this long term. Over the last 18 months, the cohort has developed actionable opportunities for policy change that we'll talk about today, and these will improve access to wastewater solutions in rural and disadvantaged communities across the country. It's real meat that we can kind of put on the bones of this issue to make change. Of course, context is important. All of this comes on the heels of the largest ever federal investment in water wastewater infrastructure, which is why we're so happy to be with our federal partners today. The bipartisan infrastructure law, or the bill, as I'm told it's called, is a rare opportunity to leapfrog outdated technologies and service models and to do something truly effective. We're probably not going to see another opportunity like this again in our lifetimes, at least not in the near future. But I also think this is an opportunity to put communities who have been ignored back at center stage. And that's what we'll try to do here today. Fundamentally, the Decentralized Wastewater Innovation Cohort is an act of generosity. The members of our cohort want to help our federal partners meet their goal of reaching rural and disadvantaged communities, where groups like DigDeep and others have been working actively for years. And they've put their time and their effort and their passion, blood, sweat, and tears into these recommendations. And we're so grateful for them. But the work of the DWIC is also deeply personal. Everyone here on this call, I think I can say, believes that every person in the United States, no matter their race, their income, or their geography, deserves reliable, safe access to sanitation, something that the majority of us take for granted. So to kick us off today, I'd like first to thank Julie Wechter, our Chief Program Officer at DigDeep, whose brainchild this was, and Al Smith, who brought this to life and has done such a great job shepherding the cohort along. I'd like to thank our cohort members, of course, for all of your time. I know at the beginning, some of you were like, well, what? We're so busy. How are we possibly going to do this? And I've seen this community grow, and you develop connections to each other. And reading over this final policy report with these incredible challenges and opportunities has been such an inspiration to me. So thank you. I also want to thank our advisors who are here today, and finally our agency partners, especially USDA and EPA, who made this roundtable possible by co-hosting. So on behalf of our staff and partners, thanks for making the time to join this initiative, this important initiative. And what we hope will be the start of many collaborative discussions as we work to close the water and sanitation gap in the US once and for all. Before getting further into the program, I'm going to hand it back to Al for some more introductions. Thanks, Al.
Thank you very much, George. So kicking us off next, we're going to bring up to the stage Andrew Sawyers, the Director of the Office of Wastewater Management at the USEPA. So Andrew, I will pass it off to you.
Thanks, Al. And I am entering the virtual stage, right? So I think just sort of echoing the intros and the words earlier, thank you all a lot for inviting us and being part of this conversation. I think it's absolutely important for us, EPA, but not just EPA, to our partners across the board to figure out ways to address some of the critical needs in the wastewater space, particularly on the decentralized and sort of in the decentralized space. I think as many of you are aware, there are so many communities, and there was certainly reference to Loudoun County, but it's, for EPA, at least from EPA's perspective, we spend a lot of time working on communities across the board that are experiencing similar issues, whether it's in Alaska, along the Mexico border and the Colonias, in some of our larger states in Appalachia, in Puerto Rico. There are just a lot of issues around lack of basic running water and indoor plumbing. And I believe, and we have said repeatedly, we have an obligation, frankly, to figure out ways to address some of those issues. And when you enter into some of these communities and you see issues related to straight pipes and sewage related to straight pipes and lagoon failures and lack of indoor plumbing and just the sort of the myriad of issues related to that, it sort of urges you to figure out ways to address and or at least provide potential solutions going forward. And I think overall, when you think about these circumstances, again, whether it's sort of inadequate or failing wastewater infrastructure and the public health implications that are associated with it, it's an area for us, at least, it's an area for us right now within the Environmental Protection Agency that there's a lot of effort we're focusing a lot of effort on in this area. And we're doing so in partnership with USDA and some of our other federal partners. And obviously, many of you on the ground, I know my team has been in conversations with you on a couple specific projects that we're contemplating right now and working to stand up to be responsive to some of the issues there. I think Al and George talked briefly about the bipartisan infrastructure law. I won't get into it in any detail. We recently published the implementation memo, which was made available to all the states. on exactly how to, implement the $43 billion, which of the $43 billion, about $14 billion, close to $14 billion will be spent on wastewater related activities over the next 5 years. And specifically, it provides almost 12 billion, 11.7 billion through this traditional Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. And in addition to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we also have our base Clean Water SRF Revolving Loan Fund allocation that states will get. Of the $12 billion, for traditional projects, there's also another $1 billion for emerging contaminant, which is, we could certainly respond to the extent your questions related to that. But I want to speak specifically to the $11.7 billion. One of the real opportunity areas for us here is that 49% of the funding is actually offered as grants and or principal forgiveness. And I think these funds, frankly, can provide a pathway for many of the underserved communities that are wrestling with the sort of the myriad of wastewater failures that we described above. And generally, many of these communities may not be able to access traditional SRF loan. And so we are working to figure out ways to make sure that at a minimum, we can provide an opportunity for them to access a state intended use plan. One way to go about this, and this is something I'd want to just emphasize a bit, EPA and USDA, and we're looking to launch what I would call sort of an unprecedented effort around technical assistance. And it's a key effort, it's a key element in many of the work that we're going to be sort of undertaking over the next several months, frankly, years, where we will use a subset of our resources to provide direct TA to many of the communities that we described above, underserved communities in states, tribes, in the territories. The idea here is to figure out ways by providing the assistance to do an assessment of what the issues are, looking at potential solutions, ultimately help them to access funding, get in on a state IUP, reduce some of the affordability concerns that many of them are wrestling with. And so we are starting to sort of build that process out internally. We're trying to structure our TA plan in a way that it will be durable. It will be something that can be stood up, based on the circumstances that the various communities are dealing with. It's one that potentially can be replicated during the bill and obviously subsequent to the bill. I think part of the challenge that we talk about is sort of connecting many of these communities, whether it's to traditional wastewater systems, or if you want to perhaps build out a package systems, or maybe some have to remain on in their traditional septic systems. But our solutions, hopefully, and when I say our, the community solutions and EPA in support of it, will likely support the best opportunity for many of those communities going forward. We want to make sure that we're addressing issues around planning, as I talked about, assessment, project development, whether they need financing or funding, whether it's a rate analysis. And so the TA efforts, I think, are going to be pretty expansive. The entire suite of technical assistance ideas that you can think about, we hope to provide that through our menu of services. And that's one of the items we're building out at EPA, sort of a fairly expansive menu of services in terms of technical assistance that can be provided to communities. So again, we see this as an opportunity, working with our partners, the states, the tribes, and organizations like DigDeep, our MOU partners, to strengthen what I believe is a key relationship to help communities that historically have not accessed our resources to get access going forward. And so looking forward to the conversation today, the ideas and the future collaboration that will come from it. And I would like to end by just sort of mentioning and reinforcing our commitment to continuing these conversations as we collectively work towards closing the wastewater infrastructure gap. So Al, I'd like to hand it back to you, but very much looking forward to the conversation and hearing ways and looking at some of the potential ideas that emerge from the conversation today that we could utilize going forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Really appreciate that introduction and the information that you just presented. My understanding for USDA is that James Fritz will be presenting on behalf of Steve Polachek. And so, James, unfortunately, I don't have your title in front of me, so I'll go ahead and pass it over to you and let you take care of the introductions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. Steve sends his regards. Unfortunately, he was unable to join the call for today, but certainly we appreciate all the efforts that are going into this initiative and just to the whole decentralized movement in general. It's something where I've seen it being a resident of both someone who's on a public system and also on a private system. So I've seen firsthand how it goes with wells and septic and so on and so forth, and decentralized components. And if we have that issue here in a state like Massachusetts, where I'm joining you from today, we certainly understand from the conversations and from being out in rural communities, the impact that, the challenges that are really truly faced by folks trying to gain access to safe and reliable water and wastewater systems. So that's first and foremost, just, appreciate everybody's efforts. Andrew said it well, that just a lot of support, a lot of cooperation and collaboration going on right now across EPA and a number of other federal agencies. So just really appreciate that collective effort. And we're as an agency, USDA, Rural Development. My name, as I'll mention, James Fritz. I am the branch chief of the portfolio management branch within the water environmental programs. I do apologize, my voice has been in and out, but hopefully you can bear with me through this portion, and hopefully it doesn't give out. But yeah, those relationships have really been key. And we have a number of different programs here at USDA. I think we have north of 15 programs in terms of water environmental programs. And some of those do really truly focus in on decentralized elements. Actually, one of the programs we're working through right now is our decentralized, and it's a misnomer. It's called the Decentralized Water System Grant Program, but it's actually Water and Wastewater System Grant Program, which hopefully we'll be releasing the funding opportunity announcement on in the very short term. That's a program that Congress has given us additional support. So we're looking forward to having the most funds that we've had in that account in quite some time, just nearly tenfold what it was previously. So just I really appreciate the support there and look forward to working through the various nonprofits and other entities that are able to help us achieve those positive effects on communities with these centralized needs. So we also have some other programs. I know we've talked about technical assistance quite a bit in recent meetings, and truly that is a stepping stone and really a crucial part of this process. And we have a number of programs, the Circuit Rider program, obviously. We also have some more focused efforts recently, and specifically targeted towards the Mid-South efforts, that what we call the Technical Assistance and Training Program Regional Wastewater Treatment System Initiative, which is an effort really to find innovative ways and solutions to finding to battling the black soils conditions in Alabama and the Deep South. So that's a wonderful new initiative that we have going on. Actually awarded our first grant there just this past July to the University of South Alabama and a consortium there. And we're looking to hopefully release the funding opportunity announcement for another round under that initiative in the near term also. So there's those are two highlights to positive initiatives. We also have the ability to work with cluster systems and other sorts of decentralized systems through some of our other programs. So just really fortunate to have a great network of partners, both in the federal government and outside of the federal government. And just the support of Congress and others to be able to continue to pursue initiatives and means to be able to support decentralized initiatives. So, as mentioned, I'm coming to you from Massachusetts. We have a team. So my team has a host of folks who are from all over the country, all over the U.S., from New York to Hawaii. We have folks in New Mexico and a number of different states. And so just bringing that collective to our national office team has been huge, just massive in being able to relate to local ideas. We have a pretty vast network at USDA. So we have 47 state offices, but there's over 1,000 specialists throughout the U.S. that deliver our programs, whether it's rural Alaskan Village grants, whether it's colonia or tribal specific funding or decentralized initiatives. So just a vast network. We've been really fortunate. Programs over 75 years old and just continues to roll on. So really for us at this point, it's just building off those networks, having these conversations with folks like you and trying to find new and innovative ways to really tackle this really great, truly great need in rural America. And as mentioned, if I have water and wastewater issues here on my own decentralized system, we know that that is certainly magnitude. There's certainly a higher magnitude to those needs in other parts of the country. So I'll leave it short there, Alan and folks, but I just really appreciate everything that DigDeep and all the other members, both federal and non-federal, are bringing to this initiative, and look forward to finding new, innovative, and really collaborative ways to tackle this truly great need. So thanks again, everybody, and look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you, Andrew and George, for those great introductions. And we're very excited to be here with you in the spirit of collaboration and to present our work. And so I'll just take a brief moment here to introduce the Decentralized Wastewater Innovation Cohort, and they'll have an opportunity to get up and introduce their own organizations, but I'll just give a kind of a brief overview. So like George said, we started on this project about 18 months ago, and I don't think that we ever really envisioned that we would be standing up here in front of such a large audience and having such incredible conversations, or that we'd have such incredible changes in the policy and legislative sphere to kind of coincide with this. Is almost like the stars aligned for our time here. And through facilitated discussions and site exchanges, these 5 organizations have worked very hard to present some opportunities that we can collaborate on as a group to help reach these underserved communities. And so we're excited to present today, but before we get to the presentations, I'd like to give each cohort member an opportunity to present themselves. We have I'll just go through them real quick. We have the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. We have Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations, also called VI. We have the DigDeep's very own Navajo Water Project, Alabama's Black Belt Unincorporated Wastewater Program, and the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. And those make up the core of the cohort, but we're also supported by a technical advisory board consisting of such organizations like IAPMO, NAURA, RCAP, National Rural Water Associations, Swiftwater Solutions, Rogue Water, Global Communities, and the Massachusetts Alternative Septic Systems Testing Center. And so we've had a lot of collaboration on this and a lot of good ideas and a lot of good, hopefully actionable opportunities and recommendations from folks who are actually working on the ground in communities. And we're excited to be here today. So John, with that, I will let you introduce yourself and your organization, and then we'll move through the other cohort members.
Thanks, Al. Hello, my name is John Warren. I'm the Director of Standards and Innovation for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, otherwise known as ANTHC. I'm here today with Pierre Costello, Senior Quality Engineer for ANTHC. ANTHC is a statewide tribal health organization that serves 229 tribes located in 240 communities across the state. ANTHC is an organization with over 3,000 employees that includes a major hospital and an engineering and construction division. Services that ANTHC provides include primary health care, community/environmental health consultation, and infrastructure planning, design, construction, and some other services. Our infrastructure projects include primarily sanitation facilities and village health clinics. Pierre and I work in the Division of Environmental Health and Engineering, otherwise known as DHE, which provides planning, design, construction, and operation and maintenance technical assistance for systems across the state. DHE has over 200 employees and delivers over $100 million in projects annually, with the majority of our projects focused on piped infrastructure and about 25% on decentralized solutions. Construction and operation of facilities in Alaska is complicated because many of the communities are remote with limited access. Weather conditions can be extreme and resources to support construction and operation are often limited. The presence of permafrost over much of the state also drives the need for creative solutions for both piped and decentralized systems. Presently in Alaska, there are over 3,000 homes and more than 30 communities that have no access to acceptable sanitation, instead relying on 5-gallon buckets for toilets and shared wash basins to conserve water. Thus, creative decentralized alternatives that are embraced by regulatory agencies and the funding agencies will be needed in the future to bridge this gap. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, John. I'd like to pass this off to Stuart Coleman with VI out in Hawaii. Oh, your microphone's still off.
Aloha from Hawaii. My name is Stuart Coleman, and I'm the executive director and co-founder of VI, which stands for Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations, but is also the Hawaiian word for water. And that is the heart of our mission, protecting water quality. And we do that by reducing sewage pollution and restoring healthy watersheds by providing innovative and affordable and eco-friendly solutions to waste and wastewater management. And I was lucky enough to go to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Reinvented Toilet Expo a number of years ago and realized that there was just an amazing opportunity to update what are often kind of decades old and sometimes centuries old sanitation facilities. And there's a lot coming down the pike that, you know, goes from more a linear system to a more circular system. And so, you know, our vision is really to help Hawaii, the state, county, and individual homeowners with the process of upgrading their cesspools and failing septic systems to more affordable, efficient systems that are better for the environment. And we do this through our 5 programs. We have innovative technology, and then pilot projects to really show those technologies, put them in the ground. And then we are developing financial resources for homeowners. And then we push for policy and advocacy. And finally, we do outreach and education. So last night, we did a town hall meeting, and we're doing them across the state in areas that have the highest density and number of cesspools. And as I'll talk about later, we have about 88,000 across the country. And so it's a huge problem in Hawaii, and we have the most per capita in the country as well. Although my colleague Stuart Wah in Long Island they have the most over there in sheer numbers. We have the most per capita. I want to thank my amazing team. Christina Comfort is our program manager, and Yoko Schneider is our coordinator, and Sierra is our new project coordinator. And so we thank you all for taking the time today to discuss these issues and bring really needed attention to these areas. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Appreciate that. And so next up, we have Emma Robbins with DigDeep's Navajo Water Project. So I'll hand it off to you.
Morning, good afternoon, everybody. Yate, I'm Emma Robbins, and I am the Executive Director of the Navajo Water Project with DigDeep Water. And a brief background on what we do is we work with Navajo families here on the reservation to get safe, clean, hot and cold running water. The project was started in 2014, and we've done a wide variety of work, but the bulk being installing home water systems to families who are living off grid and who oftentimes don't have the opportunity to get piped water. There are 30% of Navajos living on the reservation where I'm from who don't have access to water in their homes. And so we have served about 300 families across the reservation. When I first started, I was the only employee. Now we're about 30. And apart from getting people clean, safe water, a big part of what we do, which I'll talk about later, is really embedding ourselves in the community and collaborating with community partners to make sure that these projects are long-term. The way that we get people clean running water, as I mentioned, are these off-grid systems, which are a 1,200-gallon cistern, and these are filled up monthly by water trucks that we provide from a clean, safe source. Not only do we face a huge amount of water poverty here on the Navajo Nation, but there are hundreds of uranium mines that have not been cleaned up. And this oftentimes affects ground and surface water. Additionally, what we're doing is we help folks who do have piped water with bill pay, something that we saw that was a huge rise during COVID because of loss of jobs and income. We also help people with septic cleaning, and we help people, well, what we're working towards and what I know y'all know about and what we'll talk about is getting people sanitation in their homes, because obviously that's a huge issue. And we are also assisting with plumbing breakages. You know, in the Navajo Nation, there aren't a lot of places, and that's something that we help out with. And we have worked with larger schools or one school to get updated infrastructure. And it's been something that, you know, we've obviously had to shift doing during the pandemic because we were not able to go into homes, but that didn't mean that we had to stop getting people safe water. So we started expanding to other communities doing safe water delivery. And it's something now, after 2 years, that we've learned that we are capable of helping people with emergency relief work. But I'm really proud to report that we are starting to install the home water systems again to add on to that 300 number. I do always think of our work, and I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate the cheesy water analogy here. I hope you do. But our work is sort of like a water drop because we start in one community and it expands. And I'm really proud of our team. There are a lot of us, well, most of us are from the community. And so there is a lot of investment and care that goes into the work. And the last thing that I'll say is we provide operation and maintenance and make sure that these projects are long-term. So, you know, collaborative, not consentful, and that they are sustainable, and that we are leaving things just as good as when we started for when we leave. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Emma. Next up, we have the Black Belt Unincorporated Wastewater Program, represented by Sherry Bradley and Kevin White. And I think, Sherry, you're going to be speaking for us.
Yes. Hi, I'm Sherry Bradley. I am the Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services. We regulate the permitting, installation, maintenance, and use of on-site sewage disposal systems. We also permit products for on-site systems. I stepped out my regulatory role and I created the Black Belt Unincorporated Wastewater Program. It was created out of need, and this was directly for Lowndes County, Alabama, because the funding that we have is earmarked for Lowndes County. We do plan to move in other Black Belt counties, however. Lowndes County has received international attention because of what we call straight pipes, where the person flushed the toilet, a white pipe is connected to the house, the sewage goes straight on the ground. Sometimes it's in the back of the home, sometimes it's in the front of the home. I have been hearing about Lowndes County need for proper wastewater disposal for about 20 years. And so I finally decided to do something about it. And when I did look at Lowndes County, there was absolutely no infrastructure whatsoever in the unincorporated areas. So what BBUWP, Black Belt Unincorporated Wastewater Program, what it does, it installs on-site sewage treatment disposal systems for those families, communities with no proper wastewater disposal. It also looks at repairing systems, whether those systems were put in illegally or if the homeowner themselves installed the system. We go in and we install conventional systems. We have installed engineered design systems, and thanks to Dr. Kevin White, we have some innovative designs that we're getting ready to install. So this is our 4th year doing this. The program is growing. I just received a handful of applications this morning, and I was glad to see that. At first, it was a little slow, but now it's caught on in the community. The communities are seeing what we're doing. We are also, what we recently did, we brought in new partners. IWIC, International Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene. We partnered with them. We actually went in and we assessed homes where IWIC came and brought volunteer plumbers, where they repaired much needed repairs were done. So the program is growing bigger and bigger. And so I'm just glad that I'm a part of it. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Sherry. I appreciate that introduction. And looks like we have lost Stuart Wall, who is supposed to present on behalf of the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology and just give themselves an introduction. So if he pops back in, I assume he's having technical difficulties, we'll put him on stage, but in the interim, I can give the brief overview. So New York Center for, and I won't do as good a job as him, obviously, but I'll give it a shot. So the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology is run out of Stony Brook University, and they've been looking at innovative on-site wastewater treatment technologies on Suffolk County and Nassau County on Long Island, New York. And so they have been looking at different options for advanced nitrogen removal to help clean up the groundwater table, which is everybody's drinking water source, as well as nearshore waters and fisheries. And so they've been an incredible component of this cohort and have provided a valuable perspective on policy and innovative technology, and also have contributed to some of the funding opportunities that we're going to present. And so, oh, there's Stuart. Stuart, I was just doing just okay job of introducing your organization. Would you like to take over for me?
I am so sorry. I'd like to apologize to everyone here. We have at Stony Brook University security controls, like I think probably many of you experience in the federal government. And earlier this morning, I was told that I had to change a password to a new multi-digit password. And about 2 minutes ago, I was just thrown out of Zoom because of security. They wanted me to check in again. I really, really apologize to everyone. In any event, I would like to say our center, I'm a research scientist at the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. What we do here is look for technological, innovative ways to solve Long Island's nitrogen problem, and which is affecting our groundwater, which is our sole source of drinking water, as well as through submarine discharge, marine ecosystems, which are experiencing the effects of eutrophication. On the drinking water side, of course, I'm sure many of you are aware that there have been a number of epidemiological studies which suggest different health risks in nitrate in drinking water. What our center does, the technologies that we work on are very simple technologies that work with natural materials here on Long Island, primarily sand and wood chips, to harness naturally occurring microbes to basically speed up biological processes that happen in the natural environment to remove nitrate, nitrification and denitrification. We just, through different configurations, want to speed up that process. The results that we've had to date are very encouraging. We're required to get under 19 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen here. Our systems do that. And we work, it isn't just technical research that we do. A big challenge here is to get these systems installed on an affordable basis. On either side of where we work on Long Island, we have centers of affluence in New York City or out in the East End of Long Island, which create a lot of demand for the construction industry. And we work to lower the costs of installing these systems. So I spend a lot of my time not only with design professionals and Suffolk County regulators, but also with installers and to figure out, electricians and plumbers, to figure out how to get these technologies in correctly. We also work with the Shinnecock Nation in Southampton to produce, to install systems through Indian Health Services. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Stuart. That was a much better job of introducing yourself than I was doing, of course. So much appreciated. So without further ado, we are going to get into the bulk of the presentation here, which we will have 4 speakers discussing the 4 different policy opportunities that were identified in the policy brief that was, I believe, pasted into the chat and then also included in the webinar registration. And so I'll just run through those really quickly before we get going. And those are, I'll just read them. They're also in the policy document. So opportunity number 1 is develop an accurate count and map of decentralized wastewater system deficiencies in the US. Use this improved data to drive resource allocation to increase the efficiency and impact of federal and state programming. Opportunity number 2 is to expand and improve outreach programs to impacted communities and households to reduce access barriers to funding mechanisms. Number 3 is prioritize regulatory support and funding for alternative technologies to improve access to affordable and effective decentralized wastewater systems. And number 4, invest in long-term relationships with impacted communities and households to improve compliance, ensure longevity, deepen cultural integration, and improve public health outcomes. And so our first speaker today will be Sherry Bradley, presenting on policy opportunity number 1. Sherry, if you could come up to the screen and go into presentation mode.
Okay, hold on. So can you see me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can see and hear you.
Okay.
We can get your presentation.
Opportunity number
up.
1.
Sure, we don't yet have your presentation up. If you could present your screen.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Opportunity number 1 deals with actually the need for data collection. If you ask anyone at the city, county, state, federal level, exactly how many straight pipes there are, say for example, in Lowndes County, no one could tell you. And this has been a problem for some time now. That's a perfect example of a straight pipe. The two things that are driving the straight pipe population is what I call them, because it's 80% of the population in the rural area. It's going to be the type of soil that's there in Lowndes County, which is black belt soil. It's impermeable. It's hard to deal with. Basically, it's just clay. And then also the poverty level that's in Lowndes County. But when you look at this scenario here, you're looking at problems with the public health. The public's health, as they're down the street from this lady's home, there is a family that have shallow well water and they stay sick all the time. So it makes you wonder, is that from a lot of straight piping? Challenge number 1 that we have is the fact that, again, sanitation data is insufficient, resulting in, when you look at federal funding, when you don't have a lot of data, then federal funds really don't go to the person that has less data. It goes to the one with more data and more information about what's going on. So it actually impacts the community when funding is not enough funding is received. Nationwide sanitation data is insufficient, resulting again in federal funding programs that lack focus and efficiency for impacted communities. On this particular slide that you're looking at, on the right side, I have passed by this lady's house, I don't know how many times. It looks nice on the outside, but she was straight piping. If you look in the very back of her home, that white pipe that's leading from her home, it went straight into an abandoned well. Once we found out, though, that she was one of many in the community that had straight piping, we immediately, the BBUWP, Black Belt Unincorporated Wastewater Program, immediately took her application and installed a system. And if you look at the soil, not all soils in Alabama is bad soil. She actually had some good sandy soil. So this particular installation is a conventional installation. You look to the left and you see what we're putting in for her. So by developing an accurate count and map of U.S. household experience in sanitation deficiencies, impacted communities can be identified and prioritized. We look at whether or not the person in the home is elderly, confined to the home. We look at their incomes. But basically now, as we go out in the community, we are slowly charting straight piping. So the data collection that's needed, and there are several ways to go about this. If you look at the map, now there's a lot of, take Lowndes County, there's a lot of incorporated areas in Lowndes County. It's listed here. You have the Lowndes County water system, Whitehall, Mosses, Lounsboro, Hamer, and Fort Deposit. Now those are incorporated, but what we're looking at is the unincorporated area. And one way of going about that, getting data collection needed, we're looking at zip codes. We're looking at the soil itself. If the soil is very bad soil, and you know you have poverty in the community, then you do know that straight piping could be occurring. So that's what signals us to go out and look in the particular area. A lot of times there's other problems with people straight piping. There are restrictions in the soil, probably bedrock, high water table, and so forth. But poverty actually drives what's going on in the area. So once data is collected, we can take action. Dr. White had stated to create a task force of key agencies and communities on data collection and analysis. Then you prioritize the need and strategies for improving sanitation in these communities. So once data is collected, correct data, because now we don't even know what's out there. We don't know how, as someone said, we don't even know how big the universe is with this problem. But once proper data is collected, we can take action. And the results is actually for the homeowner. This lady just received the system and she's so happy. But through the effort of the prioritized list, she received sanitation support. So I cannot stress the need for data collection. It tells us which way to go. It tells us how many people we will be serving. And then once we have a benchmark, we can achieve a lot. So that's all I had to say on data collection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Really appreciate that presentation. And just as a reminder, we will have a Q&A session after this. So just as things come up, please put those in the Q&A down in the very bottom next to the chat, and we will get to address those there. So next up to the stage, I would like to invite Stuart Coleman to speak to opportunity number 2, which has a lot to do with funding. And so Stuart, if you'd like to, you're welcome to turn your camera on or just speak to the slides.
Thank you. It's not allowing me to turn on my camera. I think you guys have had enough of watching me maybe. But again, my name is Stuart Coleman and I'm from VI, and this is so fascinating listening to Sherry and the others. I'm just, I'm really honored to be part of this group. It's such an important group, and it's been great getting to know members across the country. You know, as I mentioned, Vai is the Hawaiian word for water, and interestingly enough, Vai in Hawaiian means wealth. And so just having access to clean drinking water was a source of wealth in Hawaiian culture, and I think that's something we should remember. In Hawaii, we have a unique situation in that we have 88,000 cesspools that release 53 million gallons of sewage into our groundwater every day, you know, posing all kinds of health and environmental risk. And, you know, it's like a massive subsurface sewage spill that we have every day in Hawaii, especially with our very porous and volcanic soils, although we do have a lot of clay in certain parts of the island as well. With the passage of Act 125 a few years ago, the law mandated the conversion and upgrade of all cesspools by 2050. But many of those homeowners just can't afford the conversion cost, which can range anywhere from 20 to 50,000. We also need a larger workforce to help with the conversion of all those cesspools. So, you know, estimated average cost of, you know, when we look at the financial burden is about 38,000 per conversion, but they can go as high, you know, as 60 and over, and then they can go, you know, sometimes, you know, lower than 25, but that's not often the case just because everything needs to be shipped out to Hawaii. And, you know, with in a poll, it was said that, you know, even with a $10,000 subsidy, 85% of cesspool conversions would be considered unaffordable. And that's based on the EPA criteria, you know, for affordable sanitation being, you know, less than or equal to about 10% of household income for total capital and O&M cost. You know, so looking, you know, at this challenge, you know, disadvantaged communities, as you all know, have difficulty accessing funding, you know, these funding mechanisms for a variety of reasons. One is a lack of administrative, technical, and financial capabilities. There's also varying eligibility requirements for state level funding. Property values in Hawaii, for instance, or even for homes that were inherited and very poor, there can be in Oahu valued at $1 million just because real estate is so incredibly valuable out here. And so sometimes people don't qualify for income because it's much lower, and we have one of the highest cost of living in the country. And then, there's definitely a need for more skilled nonprofits and intermediaries to help access funds. And you think of the model like Craft 3 in Washington, Oregon. And in this picture, I just want to point out in the bottom right-hand corner, due to erosion, this is an exposed cesspool that is just leaching out right onto the beach. And this is not uncommon in a lot of areas where, especially you have homes right on the shoreline, and we've had 25% loss of some of our shoreline areas due to erosion. And so, this is something that we really just have to fix, because it poses too many health and environmental risks. And so, there's also finally the lack of ability to pay upfront costs or to repay low interest loans. And so, the loan forgiveness things that were mentioned earlier, as part of the SRF, these are going to be most welcome in Hawaii, where we definitely have a lot of folks that could not afford it. Moving on, if we look at the, by removing regulatory and eligibility barriers from, these financial programs, I think impacted communities and these households can much more readily access decentralized wastewater system funding. And so here are some ways that we think that can be done to remove obstacles and kind of optimize existing structures. Offer, some kind of concierge-like service to support under-resourced communities to access funds. Again, Craft 3 in the Pacific Northwest is a great example of that. Streamlining the process, eliminate inefficiencies, and reduce the upfront costs of application. Right now with the SRF, we just had a talk with our Department of Health folks who operate it, and they're like, oh, well, we can't afford we can apply for the funding, but we can't do what it takes to process the funds. And the counties are saying the same thing. Well, we don't have people to do that. So I think, adding funds for positions to help them process these funds and get them to the right people would be great. And, educating the state, the counties, and communities and homeowners about the best strategies to how to access those clean water state revolving funds for these decentralized projects. Because, as was said, they generally went towards bigger systems and centralized systems. And so now we need to try to get it directly in the hands of the people that need them the most. And we also want to create better systems and new tools between federal, state, and local entities. And again, we saw this in a conversation yesterday where they're just incredible silos. We need to just make sure that these are kind of eliminated. We can go to the next slide, Yoko. And so, making that funding more available, and then also really targeting our outreach and support to disadvantaged communities, and expanding existing programs to do outreach, and creating the tools and guidance to prioritize the communities most impacted by climate change. And so, with individual wastewater systems in Hawaii, if you're doing just kind of systems, traditional systems, they won't work in the coastal areas because of sea level rise and inundation. And so individual wastewater systems We think they're going to need more of kind of low pressure sewer systems where there's not going to be sewer, where there's infiltration inflow, but smaller pipes that are PVC pipe that can be, like liquid only sewer that can be pumped to nearby sewer lines. And to do all this, if we go to the final slide, if you coordinate between local, state, and federal agencies, around these funding gaps for decentralized wastewater improvements, I think that would really allow the work to be done more efficiently, and helping homeowners kind of deal with that trade-off between physical and financial health, and the upfront cost of these systems, which they just can't afford, at more than $40,000. And we like to tell them that this is really a win-win situation for the state. That if we can bring this historic opportunity we have in front of us, I mean, it's just once in a generation with this funding that's particularly calling out wastewater funding, we can create more jobs. And indeed, we just helped get an earmark request to do workforce training out here, because we desperately need more workers to do these systems. And so, as far as the facilitation, we would be glad to host we have a innovations in sanitation convening in Hawaii that we're going to be hosting in late July, and we'd love for any of you to come out and to bring the different stakeholders together at the federal, state, and county levels, along with other key stakeholders. We think this is going to be a really valuable solution, and we appreciate the time that you all are taking to hear about our issues in Hawaii and see how that these are national. So mahalo, and back to you, Al.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Really appreciate that. Moving on to our third opportunity, which has to do with alternative technologies and regulatory flexibility. We'll bring Sherry Bradley back up to the stage to present policy opportunity number 3.
Okay. The host has to open me up. Okay. All right, for opportunity number 3, just a second. Okay. Opportunity number 3, basically, again, it was just stated to discuss support for alternative sanitation technologies and regulatory strategies. And by having this, homeowners would be able to access affordable sanitation, where basically a sewage treatment plant is infeasible. In rural area, Lowndes County, it may be 10 miles before you see a house, from one house to the next house. So sewage treatment plants are not the answer there. I had the opportunity of visiting Alaska, and I wanted to go to Alaska because I felt like Lowndes County and Alaska had the same concerns. Number one, the soil. Because of permafrost, you cannot dig under the soil. Well, in Lowndes County, because of the type of soil, the clay soil, you cannot install field lines. And then you look at the poverty level in Lowndes County. And in Alaska, we visited the native communities. We could only get there by plane. And so they were so much similar. The only different I found 2 things. I didn't see, and it could have been, but I didn't see sewage on the ground. In Lowndes County, you had straight piping everywhere. In Alaska, everything looked so clean. But that's because they implemented a lot of alternative sanitation methods. And the one that I loved the most was called the portable alternative sanitation system. It was clean. It was affordable. Alaska methods were affordable. And so I wanted to bring that back to Alabama. But I knew when I looked at what Alaska had, I knew I would have some concerns like my own site rules, my own on-site sewage disposal rules, working with our sister agency, the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, because when you talk about effluent surface discharge, ADEM regulates surface discharge, only for me to find out later that our terminology meant two different things. So we finally communicated very well, and we straightened everything out. Now here's a picture of Lowndes County. Like I said, Alaska, everything was clean, but they used a lot of alternative sanitation methods. Well, I had always been instructed that in the county for the state of Alabama, everything had to be uniform. Everyone had to follow the same guidelines, same rules. Well, if the soil is different from county to county, why can't our rules be different from county to county? Or why can't our rules pinpoint a change? So when I came back from Alaska, that's the first thing I did. We changed our own site rules. And the whole while on the trip back, I was thinking, what do I need to do? How am I going to get this change? I can change the definitions. I can do this. I can do that. Well, our on-site rules were changed. We have a section implemented called Innovative Designs. And thanks to Dr. Kevin White for that, for Innovative Designs. The regulatory strategy came when I called up ADEM, our sister agency, and say, look, we need y'all to bend. Well, they didn't bend, but what we found out that in communicating was that we just had to change some word definitions. And once we did that, Alabama is now getting ready to implement its first effluent discharge system. And it was a learning process, because when we tried to do it before, we didn't take in our setbacks. We kind of messed up a little bit, but we're on the right track now. So I'm seeing where this will work. I'm seeing where alternative sanitation technology and regulatory strategies will work. If I'm doing it for Lowndes, I can do it in every other county in Alabama. Now, this gentleman that you're looking at, the mobile home, the alternative method would fit great here, because our engineer design systems, which run about $26,000, cost more than the mobile home unit. With the alternative method, we can save money and we can put in him a working system. Now, the challenge you see here, verdict soils. This is 3 days after rain and water is still standing. So what we did with our on-site rules, when you have poverty, what you have is people buying lots that may be 1/4 of an acre or 1/2 an acre. Well, when it comes down to innovative design or engineer design, when it comes down to the engineer design system, the footprint is so large, we can't work on a small lot. Now, what we have just done to change, we just asked for a variance to change in our rules. And instead of requiring 150 gallons per day per bedroom, now we require 100 gallons per day per bedroom for sizing. So we are being flexible. And I think flexibility is a word that state and federal and county, we should all look at that word and work together, because with flexibility, we can make a change. Affordability is one. Protecting the public's health is what's important. And that's what we're doing, protecting the public's health. The note says difficult terrain often means costly wastewater treatment, and that's true. And the people can't afford it. But the better the soil, the cost of the engineered design system is higher. This slide shows that one size does not fit all, and it shouldn't. One size can't fit all. Because of changing, Because of our regulation definitions and communications, and just working and being open and flexible, we are seeing more improvement in what we're doing now. We are getting greater results in what we're doing now. I know that some of you may say, well, Sherry's effluent discharge is nothing new. Well, in Alaska, it was effluent discharge, but we have to make sure that the effluent is discharged in what we call a vegetated area. So not just on the ground. So we have changed everything we're doing here in Alabama, and we're mimicking Alaska's because it's working. Anything that works, I don't care where it is, if it works, it works. It said by increasing support for alternative sanitation technology and regulatory strategies, again, we can have access to effective, affordable, and appropriate sanitation services where there were none. Now, alternative technology. When I arrived in Alaska, we went out to the Native communities. I grew up using, well, we call them outhouses, some call them pit privies. But the good thing about it is that sewage is not on the ground. There are going to be people that home we won't be able to fix. There are going to be some situations we cannot fix. But let's keep an open mind to alternative technology. The people there, like I said, everything was clean, no sewage on the ground. And I went in with an open mind. And it turned out well. Now with the results, we don't want anything in this alternative method or any regulatory changes. We don't want anything that's going to hinder the process. We don't want anything that's not affordable. What we want, and we're going to have pros and cons anywhere you look, but let's make sure that the pros outweigh the cons. The one thing that I am seeing with new technology and the way that things are done, we are having some legislative concerns, but what I'm learning today is that if you make your presentation, if you train, if you talk, if you present, then there's an understanding. So communication is a very big part of what we're doing now. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Wonderful presentation on regulatory strategies and alternative technology. So next up, we have Emma Robbins speaking to policy opportunity number 4, which has to do with community engagement. So Emma, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let's see. Literally the worst millennial. I don't see share. Oh, here we go. Share screen. All right. Okay. Can you see my screen?
We can see it. It's not full screen, but we can see it. There we go.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm really honored to be able to go after Ms. Sherry there because I'm not on camera, but I'm nodding vigorously because a lot of what she said is exactly what we see on the Navajo Nation, a sovereign nation. And, I'm going to talk about opportunity number 4, which has to deal with community engagement and how that links into traditional wastewater solutions. So, DigDeep works throughout the US, and I work primarily on the Navajo Nation. And by primarily, I mean only on the Navajo Nation, but offering advice and insight on other areas related to what I'm talking about. So big issues that we see on the Navajo Nation when people ask me, well, why don't people have sanitation? Or why don't communities have clean running water? It has to do with a lot of things like geography. If we were a state, we would be the 10th largest. if we were a country, we would be the size of Ireland. So we are huge and we're spread out everywhere. And there just aren't enough funds or resources to connect everybody to water lines. It's a really big issue when we are in 3 different states, because sometimes funding will only go up to a state line. So we're seeing big issues on the border of Utah and Arizona. States might be able to fund projects, but as soon as they hit the state line, despite the fact that we're the Navajo Nation, they can't deliver services to those other areas. We're also in a desert, and so there are issues with resource availabilities in terms of wells. We're seeing that a lot of times now, because of the drought, wells are drying up, and it's difficult for everybody to get that clean drinking water. There's a lot of trust, obviously, issues with different governments, whether that's the tribal, state, county, or federal. And that's something that we see again across the reservation. I'm from the western side, but I've seen this in all communities that we're working in. Not having these services such as sanitation and clean water is really taking an impact and a toll, not only on physical health, but also on mental well-being. If you don't have water sanitation, as we all know, you're constantly worrying about, where am I going to get that from? And with gas prices, families are having to travel extremely long distances, and that's an issue. We have 13 grocery stores on the reservation. So if you're purchasing bottled water, that can be hard in terms of traveling distances, but also availability. And it affects our cultural health as well, because one of the things that we see is specifically with elders who want to continue to live traditionally, whether that means they're living in a hogan, which is our traditional home, or they are herding sheep or tending crops and gardens. It's something that when people don't have these services, they oftentimes have to move from their land. And, for us Navajos, we're so tied to our land that when we do have to move from that traditional setting, it's like taking away a piece of our heart and taking away our culture, because we can no longer practice that. And we do look to our elders for that. Traditional wastewater solutions don't always work because there's not a lot of operation and maintenance that happens on the reservation. An example that I can give is with my families. They might be waiting tens of years to get water or sanitation. And when they finally get it, they're at an age where they have, not many years left. And that's a big problem, because having those resources and water is really going to help them with their physical and mental health, as I mentioned. And again, we're not just seeing this in one community on the reservation, we're seeing this across the board. As I mentioned when I was giving an introduction as well, uranium and arsenic on the reservation are really affecting our water sources as well. And that gets back to trust and distrust. In terms of operation and maintenance, we don't have a lot of plumbers on the reservation. And the plumbers that are here, they're so busy doing so many water projects that they're oftentimes not able to get to different areas. I want to talk specifically about some work that I did in the field yesterday to highlight some of these issues. There's a watering point that I saw, and I asked, well, why aren't we using this? We meaning community members, and why aren't we able to use it as an organization? And I was told, oh, well, it's broken. And I asked, well, what's wrong with it? Where's the breakage at? And it's something that is such a small fix. If we were in a city or off a native nation, we would just call a plumber and they'd fix it in one day. Instead, this community has been told that it'll be 4 to 5 weeks until someone can even come out to look at it, and then 4 to 5 weeks after that to actually get the work done. In terms of technologies that aren't working on the Navajo Nation, yesterday when I was also out, I saw that people with great intentions are coming and installing different systems, not necessarily water always, but solar power and other means to help people. And there's no operation and maintenance plan. So these families are asking, can we have these things removed, because they're just not working for us anymore. And this is when the idea of collaboration really comes in and how successful it is. I want to give a really big shout out to IWISH, the International Water, Sanitation and Hygiene, because they were able to install a non-traditional septic system that worked for 3 different elders, and again, who were able to get these services and stay in their home and continue to carry out our traditions and pass those along to younger generations as myself or my daughter. Traditional wastewater solutions are not sustainable, and they're a narrow approach to solve a very complex set of community concerns. You know, as Ms. Sherry mentioned earlier, there's not a one size fit all. There's not a copy and paste solution. Just because something works on one reservation doesn't mean it's going to work on ours. And we really need to tailor these experiences and solutions. I'll also say here a little shout out to Cindy Howe, who's in the background of this photo, who is one of our project managers, and she's working really hard to make sure that we're not just plugging in traditional septic systems that will fail on the Navajo Nation. You know, inadequate systems do not include community needs. There's no collaboration. It's oftentimes consentful. We need to make sure that these projects are working for us. And, you know, as I mentioned, the Navajo Nation is a huge landmass. Even if we're going from one community to another and saying this is going to work for you, we need to make sure that we're tailoring these projects for all of these different communities. We are in a desert, but some areas are more of a high desert. Some areas are at 7,500 feet above sea level. Some are at 4,000. There's different soil, there's different rock composition, and it's really important that we're taking these into account. In terms of cultural needs, not everybody wants to have things like compostable toilets in their homes. And some people, you know, have outhouses and they want something more similar to that, or they want a bathroom addition. And so it's really important that we're listening to community members. You know, systems are unsustainable, again, without this ongoing operation and maintenance. And we need to think about the impacts of climate change. And as I mentioned, the drought. If you're flushing a toilet, you know, several times a day, obviously that's more than a gallon in traditional toilet systems. And that is using a lot of water in a desert that is at a very fragile moment in terms of drought and water conservation. We also need to have local workforces and compensate these people who are working here and making sure that they're invested in the long term in their community. You know, DigDeep is not a unicorn. We are not the only people who are working on the Navajo Nation. There are so many people who are stepping up for their communities. But the difference is a lot of times people aren't able to organize formally the way that we are. And a big part of what we're doing is empowering others to be able to do that and for us to collaborate with them. You know, within this opportunity number 4, it is really important that we are investing in long-term community relationships. And as I mentioned, supporting existing community projects. I think problems that I've seen on the reservation and on other Native nations outside of Navajo communities is that there isn't a lot of money or time or resources that are invested in terms of researching and making sure that, you know, we're dealing or we're working with the elders or we're working with the local community government, and we're taking into account the different communities' opinions and needs. Because, you know, I always think that people are experts in their own communities. Something that might work in a different country isn't going to work here. And what I see a lot of times in different governments or in different NGOs is that they will spend years, they will spend millions investigating and researching different communities in the international sector, but they won't do that in our own country or on sovereign tribal nations. And so it's really important that we're doing that. This here is a photo of some of our Navajo Water Project employees. And so as I mentioned, you know, we are employing people from the communities because not only do we want to take into account what they have to say and the connections that they have with the community, but it's also about investing and making sure that we're keeping dollars there and that we're not bringing in outside sources of people who also aren't experts. You know, these people who have great intentions, as I mentioned, are coming in and wanting to solve these issues, but we really need to listen to the people on the ground. Oftentimes, reservations specifically have been in situations where there's consent or a program is built by different governments and they come in and it's sort of like, okay, we're going to do this now. Can you sign off on this? It's not like these solutions are including us from the very beginning. So collaboration is key. You know, it's important that we do work with outside peoples. It's not just that people on the reservation are going to solve everything. Like I said, we don't have a lot of plumbers. There's not a lot of people who can clean septic systems, whether it's something that's a lot more complex, like laying down a water pipeline or installing sanitation systems. As I mentioned, there's like the simple breakage of the watering point. We need to be able to have people who come in and not only bring their expertise and work with us, but also have a long-term impact of where they're training Navajos on the reservation to be able to take care of their own communities. You know, a big part of what we do and what I've seen is really helpful is when people attend local government meetings and come up with responsible contracts and MOUs. I think all of my Indigenous relatives here on the call know that signing documents with government entities or NGOs can be very triggering. And it's something that we've seen in the past with treaties not being honored is a big issue. And so it's really important that in this language, we are making sure that we're taking into account all the cultural needs and things that are in the past, not just in the future. It's important that not only are we doing research and thinking about things like sanitation or water, but also including ourselves in the community in ways that might not be related to WASH. So attending community events, learning as much as you can about the culture without taking it over and making it about yourself, but making sure that you're able to take those things into account. I've been in situations where government entities or other NGOs will say, well, I don't know why they don't trust us. You know, we're here to help. And that makes total sense. That question makes sense, but there's a way to work around that. And that really is making sure that you're taking into account what people want and what they need. Elders are such a key part of so many cultures, especially Diné culture, Navajo culture. And so it's really important to sit down and to listen to what elders have to say, because you know, they have been around in these communities for a very long time and they know what is working and what isn't. They're not just people to take data from for data's sake. And when we are working in terms of data collection, we need to be able to put this data back in the hands of community members. I've seen firsthand being here on the reservation that people will come in and they want to collect data, but it's sort of like, well, where does that data go? We never see it again. And you're taking information that is about our intimate life and our well-being, and it's hidden away somewhere, and we want to be able to know what that information says. I really, really, really do want to highlight that as much time as we're putting into international communities and as much money as we're putting into those, we need to commit to doing that on the Navajo Nation and on other reservations and on other sovereign land. When we do these things, we are empowering the communities that we want to work in. And we are making sure that these are not copy and paste solutions, that they are tailored for every community, that we are including the people who are going to actually use these systems, that we're not just delivering promises, but that we're actually following through. I think one thing that I've learned in my job and that I've learned from my dad who works in a similar field is that you also need to be realistic with what you can and what you can't deliver. We obviously want to take care of everything, but sometimes you need to be realistic and say, this might take several years, or the solution that you want might not be the best fit. So how can we work together to get what you need? You know, COVID has taught us that water is so important, and there were so many eyes on the Navajo Nation when we had some of the highest infection rates. And we were able to bring those infection rates down, and we were able to bring vaccination rates up. And that was really important because what happened was the federal government provided, you know, vaccinations, and then they worked with our communities to say, so you now administer it and you now work with people to educate. And that is the perfect example of a collaboration. When two groups work together, the community is trusted, and there is something like the vaccines provided, and we're making sure that things are put into our own language, that we're meeting with the elders, and that we're really saying, I understand that there might be some distrust in this way. It's the same thing with water, but let's work together to make sure that you're getting what you need and that you are healthy and happy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma. That was a fantastic presentation, and to all of the presenters presenting these 4 policy opportunities. And one thing at the end of Emma's presentation, and that was mentioned throughout, is the need to collaborate. And that's really what we're here to do, and what we're asking for in presenting these opportunities is a way to collaborate with those working in the federal government and those working in the regulatory space. Is that there are people here working on the ground in these communities who understand their needs and have information that's important in order to build these collaborations and to be able to provide safe access to sanitation to everybody here in the United States, not just those served by large centralized systems. And so with that, we have about 20-25 minutes for Q&A, and it looks like we have some folks from the EPA who can come up and participate. I think we've got Zach Lowenstein invited up to the stage. Heidi, if you would like to come up, we can invite you. And then perhaps looks like we still have James Fritz from USDA still on the line. If y'all have an opportunity for questions, we'd like to give y'all the floor first, and then we can open up to general Q&A from the audience, time permitting. And it was mentioned in the chat earlier, but this is being recorded, and so there will be a transcript of these presentations moving forward. So I'd like to open the floor. If panelists as well, our presenters, if you want to turn on your screens, that would be helpful as well.
So I guess I'll jump in here. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done. For those of you that don't know me, I think most of you do, but if you don't, I work in the decentralized wastewater program at EPA. Again, I just want to thank you, Al and Julie, for involving us in the planning and setting up of this event. I know it's been a long haul for you. And I also wanted to mention our decentralized wastewater MOU partnership, which our program manages, and many of you on the call are part of that partnership, which DigDeep joined recently. That partnership, it joins 20 organizations that work on issues related to decentralized wastewater, like homeowner education, technology, funding, workforce, or in this case, finding solutions to close this water and wastewater gap. So we were very happy to have DigDeep join in 2020, given the important work that they do, especially what was presented here today by the decentralized innovation cohort. The opportunities and recommendations that you presented are things that can be done, with the continued partnership across the board. And I'm excited to see how things continue to evolve, both out of my own office, as a lot of things are going on, and with the work that you're all doing. Like Andrew Sawyers mentioned earlier, who's the director of my office, we're excited about the potential bipartisan infrastructure law funding to help where we can as an agency, whether that be, in the form of technical assistance to really help connect many of these communities that are in need of funding. And then lastly, I just really wanted to mention that discussions like these, they can't be a one-off. They really should continue as this work. It seems to just be getting started. I know DigDeep has had kind of a head start with a lot of other organizations, but this type of work obviously has a very long way to go when you think of the 2 million plus that that don't have access to water or wastewater. So, given the passion of so many of you that are working within this cohort and in our partnership, I don't think that'll be an issue. So I just wanted to say, we're very grateful to DigDeep for their work within this decentralized cohort. And we're excited to see how this continues to evolve and our continued partnership. So thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those words, Zach. We're looking forward to continuing our partnership as well. Wanted to give USDA an opportunity to speak if they had any questions or any thoughts following those presentations.
Yeah, first of all, just really appreciate everything, all the efforts that have gone into this. As Zach mentioned, this is something that, we really need to do more with, to really develop. Our reality is that water environmental programs, while we have the most budget authority of any of the USDA agencies in terms of grant dollars and such, only a nominal portion of it has historically gone towards decentralized systems. Over $2 billion in funding for water environmental programs went out the door during fiscal 21, and the vast majority, only a nominal portion, went towards decentralized systems. So it's something we've been looking at closely, trying to find solutions, find answers to. We've started using some of our other programs, which have traditionally been used for centralized wastewater and water infrastructure, for more decentralized type systems. And we're trying to find other solutions as well. So, it's the same thing in the realm of technical assistance. We've had over $75 million in technical assistance funding go out the door during fiscal 21, and that led to over 50,000 technical assistance visits. And that's in various forms, trainings, on-site contacts, etc. But, most of that is in a similar fashion geared towards the on-site, the centralized system. So, I wrote down a lot of notes as folks were talking. Just really appreciate Sherry, Emma, Stuart, the rest of the team, all the presentations. Just really, eye-opening and really important. I wrote down, for instance, working between states. So I know that's something that we've just met with some members of the Navajo Nation just the other month with our tribal affairs teams, trying to find ways to work across the various states, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and even the Colorado portion. And we're trying to have similar conversations throughout other tribal nations and other unserved and underserved areas. Also wrote down workforce development. That's something that we have an initiative right now with the National Rural Water Association. But again, most of that effort has been focused on more of the centralized systems. And so we are trying to find ways to expand reach, expand access to both, decentralized systems as well. And, data collection too, and O&M needs. Just last week, I was talking with somebody on EPA's drinking water side about O&M needs within rural and also unserved and underserved areas. And so that's definitely something that's on our minds as well. And so I just really appreciate all the dialogue, all the insights, really eye-opening and important for us and for other partners to be able to hear the feedback and insight from, because our reality is we're a federal agency. We're fortunate to receive funding to specifically help rural areas, especially with the focus on low-income, distressed communities, all the other really high needs areas. But we're dependent upon all of you. So the network of folks with the boots on the ground that are out in the field, really delivering those services. So really, anytime you have feedback, we certainly welcome it. And like I said, I wrote down those notes and quite a bit more. If you were to be able to look at the paper off to my side. So definitely looking to have some follow-up conversations with various folks on the call, and I look forward to seeing what we can do in the future to take the next step to be able to help more folks throughout the entire U.S. So just really appreciate everybody's time, all of your efforts, and again, if there's anything that comes to mind that we can help with, please don't hesitate to reach out. We try to make our funding opportunity announcements and other programs. We're trying to find ways to streamline, simplify, and make them more accessible. So, we're also in the process of a number of regulatory updates. We are not a regulator. We really rely on the communities, and the engineers and the other folks, technical assistance providers, to help design and implement the systems. But we're trying to find ways through some significant updates to our program regulations, which help with the delivery of funding. So we'll be looking to likely have some feedback in the near term. At any point, if you have questions by email, is in the chat. Look forward to having future conversations and just seeing what else we could do to help all those in need throughout the U.S. and experiencing those issues. So just again, appreciate everybody's time and look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you so much, James, for those thoughts. And I think along the way, when we started this, and one of the very encouraging things that we've learned along the way is that a lot of these ideas that we've come up with and the policy opportunities that we've presented, we found people who are working on those along the way in the, different NGOs and in the agencies and federal government. And so by the time we landed here speaking to you, we've realized that there's a lot of alignment, and it's actually led to some early collaboration, which we've been very excited about, and we're looking to continue that forward. And so thank you to everybody, everybody's efforts in what you're already accomplishing, and we're looking forward to walking down that road with you as we move along. We've got some interesting questions in the chat and in the Q&A. One I might ask if Zach might be able to help me with, but it comes from the chat. Question for Zach or Heidi. Some of the speakers mentioned challenges in accessing the Clean Water SRF funds. Dr. Sawyer's mentioned 1.1 billion in available funding. Can you talk about progress you've made in this area and what future might look like? Is that, Zach, is that something you'd be willing to come up and chat about?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that. One of the things I want to mention is that we recently released a new guide on funding decentralized systems with the SRF, the Clean Water SRF. This was also a long time coming. I think it took us a couple of years to really, from start to finish, and it was just released, I think about a month and a half ago on our website. So this document really kind of outlines how to help communities and really states that have had issues getting decentralized projects on their lists, because the SRFs, the states are the ones that kind of choose which projects are funded in the SRF with the SRF. And some states have never used the SRF for decentralized. So this guide is kind of an opportunity for communities to talk to their state environmental offices, talk to their state SRF staff, really kind of outlines steps to how they may be able to communicate to be successful in getting funding. It also outlines different funding mechanisms, like success stories that have worked in other states that have used the SRF. So this is a great guide. I would definitely encourage you to check that out. With regard to what Andrew Sawyer said earlier, there's a lot of bill funding coming. A lot of it's going into the SRF, but he mentioned a lot of it is also going towards technical assistance. And so part of that is going to be to helping these communities get the funding that they need in terms of just help connect them to that funding. The funding source, the actual money with the SRF, it might be there already, but the gap is really, how do you get these communities connected to it? How do you help them apply for it? These small communities, they don't have, grant writers on staff, or, those that typically apply to those large pots of money. So that might be a reason why they're having issues getting that funding, or maybe they don't even really know about it. So, hopefully that kind of technical assistance will also help connect these communities to those funds that have been available and are going to continue to, or at least in the near future, increase with additional bill money. So hopefully that answers your question. Happy to chat offline about it as well.
Thank you so much for that, Zach. I appreciate it. And I was looking for the document link to post, but wasn't able to find it quickly. I was wondering if maybe you could post the link to that PDF in the chat for folks.
Yep, let me find that real quick.
Thank you. So A question from the Q&A tab that I think I'd like to call on at least one of our cohort members to answer. Feel free to volunteer, but it says, what were the most important opportunities that emerged by being part of the DWIC cohort? And what do you think the next iteration should look like? Does anybody want to? I have my own personal feelings on that, but I'd love to.
Well, for me, this is Sherry. For me, I was typing. I said it took me out of my comfort zone and made me travel to another state that inspired transformation of Alabama's on-site program. I worked under 5 engineers and I've always been told we want uniformity in our on-site rules. And again, I emphasize one size does not fit all. Now, the next, that's the second part of that question. What do you think the next iteration of it should look like? I'll let somebody answer that. Somebody else answer that because I don't know. I'll just go along for the ride.
Great, thanks, Sherry. Stewart, I think you wanted to jump in on that one.
Yeah, thank you. You know, for us as a relatively newer nonprofit, it was really kind of a game changer to see that there were, you know, other organizations around the country working with disadvantaged communities that were going through the same things. And so our trip to, you know, to Stony Brook University was really eye-opening because they have the most, you know, cesspools, as I mentioned, and we have the most per capita. And the similarities were amazing. Like, and we were basically able to see, you know, I used to go fishing in the Long Island Sound when I was a kid, and the shellfish industry has kind of collapsed there because of, you know, it can be directly traced to, you know, nutrient and sewage pollution from these cesspools and failing septic systems. So that was just, I can't even tell you, it elevated us to be working with these partners across the country and realize that we really have to work together if we're going to be effective to, you know, form more of a consensus and a cause. And also just the dire need for this to continue. You know, this dialogue has been really helpful for us. So we appreciate the opportunity and definitely want to keep it going.
Thanks so much, Stewart. Stewart, while I see you've got your camera on and mic off, did you want to add into that?
Well, I'd certainly like to underscore what Stuart Coleman just said about the benefits of collaboration. I agree with him that there's a lot that Hawaii is facing that's not that dissimilar to what the issues that Long Island is facing. And as we find solutions, we want to make those available to others. And when I say we find solutions, I mean affordable solutions. We have technical solutions and we're working on affordability. I'd also like to underline something that I think Sherry and Emma have both commented on. And I think it fits into, you know, the idea of what's the next iteration here. And that is, they emphasize the need for O&M. I think very, very often in meetings, there's the idea, okay, there's wastewater and there's a wastewater solution. Well, part of that solution is that there has to be continued oversight on systems that are going to work. That needs to be built into budgets. The projects that we're working on in the Shinnecock Nation, we've installed great technology. There's no budget for O&M. And those systems need to be maintained. So, you know, everything can't just be capital costs. There needs to be funding for that as well. So I'm hopeful that as we evolve solutions to these type of problems, that DigDeep will play a vital role in getting those messages to federal agencies, and that we can all evolve together. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stuart. So there's one in here that's interesting, and I think that it kind of speaks to some ideas that Andrew Sawyer's put forth in terms of direct technical assistance. And this is more of a statement than a question, but I think there's kind of a question buried in here. So with an enormous water infrastructure gap to address, how can we ensure that substantially more funding gets directed to decentralized infrastructure, and probably even you could include in there decentralized infrastructure in disadvantaged communities, so that funding isn't just swallowed up by large metropolitan projects. How do we increase that? There's a statistic mentioned there, 2% SRF funds roughly are used for decentralized systems. How do we increase that proportion? And so I think that there are there's a lot to talk about within this. And so I would love to, maybe put that out to the cohort, put out that out to the EPA. If anybody would like to weigh in on that, that would be great.
Al, I'd like to offer a couple of comments.
Yes, sir.
In Alaska, we found when we propose projects that are not necessarily in line with the gold standard piped infrastructure, standard water and on-site systems, that agencies such as USDA, EPA, Indian Health Service are reluctant to fund what might be considered an experimental technology. And we've also found, of course, the regulatory agencies maybe are reluctant to approve what could be considered an experimental technology. And I think, what I've seen here, looking at the issues on the Navajo Nation, looking at the issues in Lowndes County, of course, understanding the issues we have in Alaska, we need to look at solutions that are outside of the box that may not strictly meet the gold standard. And I think that, we have struggled, of course, in Alaska to get funding for these alternative solutions that, yes, they do work. And we are concerned about as much about the environment as we are about public health. And so, as I noted early on in the introduction, that we need solutions that agencies that provide funding and that provide regulatory approval are willing to embrace. And I think that'll be a real key feature moving forward in what the solutions will entail. Thanks.
Okay, let me say something. John is spot on, but y'all, when you look at the whole picture, we are just really getting the septic tank issue as far as funding. With the infrastructure funding coming down, we are just getting that looked into. Now, O&M costs. I have built O&M costs in the BBUWP program, but at some point I'm going to have to find other funding for O&M costs, because to keep the monthly fee at $20 or $25 for people in poverty, that ain't gonna get it in the long run. So when you look even further than that, once you pump out these tanks, once you do repair costs, we already know that some city municipalities are closing down, taking the cleaning out of the tanks. What's the word for it? My mind is gone. But we're having problems finding municipalities even take anything anymore. That's another problem. So we set up land farming so we could spread, so we can do land farming to spread across the land so it can be useful in that way. But y'all, I'm telling y'all, this is coming faster than we can meet the need. I get calls all the time saying I can't dump this stuff anywhere but in a sewage treatment plant, and they won't take it. So you got to travel another hour to another plant. So all of this is coming, and we can get ready for it. So That's what we could do on the second phase.
Excellent. Thank you, Sherry, and everybody else weighing in there. These are really important points and good discussion topics. We are up against our allotted time, and I do want to be respectful of that. So we had an additional question or two, which we can follow up via email on. This has been recorded as well. And Julie, I'll let you kind of close us out with your thoughts.
Thanks, Al, and thank you to everyone. My name is Julie Wechter. I'm the Chief Program Officer at DigDeep and have had the immense privilege to work with all of these amazing people and great organizations, as well as closely with USEPA and USDA. So I have been very encouraged, hopefully everyone that's participating here has as well, by today's discussion and the momentum and collaboration that we've heard from everyone, and definitely looking forward to ongoing meetings to continue these discussions. I think that's the most exciting takeaway, is that this is the start of a conversation as opposed to one and done. So on behalf of the DWI cohort, I want to thank Andrew Sawyers for your leadership and the leadership of the US EPA in hosting this meeting and prioritizing this issue across the US, and to James Fritz and the USDA for the work you are doing to lift up Americans in need of water and wastewater. Also, on behalf of DigDeep, I want to thank each one of our cohort members and the very helpful technical advisory board members. These are people, you are people that are working every single day to help people across the US have safe, reliable, and affordable wastewater systems that are desperately needed. And we appreciate you sharing your experiences and devoting the time to building out these recommendations that we heard today. And of course, I want to thank everyone listening in for taking the time today to help us improve the lives of Americans. We're so excited about these possibilities ahead. As we heard from James and from Zach and Andrew, and from all of the organizations, there is a lot of work ahead of us, and it seems like we have the funding that's coming into place to make that happen. So as George McGraw mentioned at the beginning, we believe that every person in the United States deserves reliable access to safe sanitation. And we're so honored by the work of the NGOs, the federal agencies, and individuals striving every day to make that a reality. Andrew Sawyers mentioned also the unprecedented effort around technical assistance, which we are all welcoming and looking forward to look at these issues and the potential solutions. James, you also mentioned the vast network and diverse staff at USDA, which is really, I think, important because this is not a political issue. This is not just a technical issue, it's a personal issue. And I think the more that we can all recognize that it does impact every single one of us, the more we can work together to find the solutions that we need. So as you heard today, we discussed many opportunities to create more efficient programs through data collection and analysis, removing regulatory barriers, creating more flexibility around alternative wastewater systems, and perhaps most importantly, forming long-term relationships with communities to find a wide range of sustainable benefits. So thank you so much to everyone. Really appreciate your time and look forward to continuing the conversation in the near future. We will be emailing out these recommendations and the recordings in the coming weeks. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, thanks.